Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Really nice that you're here and on such an important topic as well. So I'm the General Manager for Digital Video Solutions at HP Enterprise. And we sit within an organization that has communications and media experts and professionals and serving communication service providers as they transform in their journey to a digital service provider. And within that, Digital Video Solutions particularly focuses on creating exceptional video experiences all the way from the content management to its distribution and all the way to experience types of technologies as well. What are we seeing? With high-performance devices increasing with excellent resolution coming there, people are increasingly using their mobile phone not just for accessing content but other high bandwidth requirement applications as well. And in fact, something we saw very recently was that video consumption was greater than 10 billion video-enabled connected devices, not just mobile devices, but also driven by IoT, digital signage, and other types of video-consuming devices. And of course, we saw that the CNN recent launch as well, where video programs were actually dedicated to the smartphone, were actually driving the uptake, and a lot of that, a majority of that uptake, was on the mobile device as well. And then, of course, the insatiable appetite that we have in order to have quality of experience that's actually the same as our TV as well. So no shortcuts, that we actually want to experience the same experience on a tiny little device as we are used to on the big device as well. Now, I will finish the little introduction that I have in just showing you a short video clip on how we're helping service providers on that journey to becoming a digital service provider and the various different types of solutions that we offer. Video, please.
Tomorrow belongs to the fast. Winners and losers will be decided by how quickly they can move from what they are now to what they need to become. In every business, IT strategy is now business strategy. At Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, we have a full range of video products and solutions to help service providers and broadcasters. Discover the wide variety of products and comprehensive solutions dedicated to CSPs we are showcasing at Mobile World Congress this year. Learn how to deploy, manage, and start monitoring OTT or IPTV channels in minutes with just a few clicks. Observe the new perspectives offered by real-time video monitoring solutions and advanced analytics, finally making it easy to understand the trillions of daily data logs generated in your distribution chain. At Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, we make it easy to adapt to new technologies, deploy and scale services as needed, and deliver the best video experiences for your customers. Come and see the possibilities we can offer, along with some exciting live VR channel deployment demonstrations.
Okay, well now we've got sort of everybody introduced, and hopefully you've got a taste for what everybody does and their sort of qualifications and expertise being on this panel. Let's start off with a couple of questions. I'm going to generally just ask everybody on the panel to chime in. Leo, due to strategic reasons,
yeah.
you're going to be the first one.
Okay.
How real do you think the mobile sort of explosion really is? We see a lot of stats. I quoted a few. We've seen some from a couple of the panelists as well. But what are you seeing in terms of actual usage of video on mobile devices? And also, what are the trade-offs that we're seeing in terms of actual network usage, so on a cellular mobile network versus Wi-Fi offload?
Yeah. So as I showed in my slide, I think it's very real. We're seeing some generations watch a lot more video on mobile devices than on television. I think even in some places the overall stat for watching on mobile devices is higher than television. The younger generation, I have a 12-year-old daughter, she doesn't mind at all watching a show for 2 hours on a little iPhone 5, even though the iPad is about 5 seconds away and the TV is 8 seconds away. And I've even heard that some of the younger folk will watch videos vertically because this is an effort. So they actually, I think it was Newsy that was saying that there are more videos watched this way than this way. So I think it's very real. You know, in terms of usage, depending very much on the geography, you see the split in Wi-Fi and cellular being quite different. You know, in the US and in parts of the more developed world where we see an abundance of Wi-Fi, especially in the home, you will see a lot of Wi-Fi. In places like India, which is growing exponentially now in video usage, to give an example, I think only 40 million homes, give or take, don't quote me on the exact number, actually have Wi-Fi. So the only place you could watch at Wi-Fi is either you're one of those fortunate 40 million or you have Wi-Fi at work. So you see that split. And then obviously on the go drives a lot of cellular usage. And with that LTE. So there's so many different drivers that are working in that direction. 4G in the future, 5G, better screens, better viewing habits, expectations. And only something like 1 or 2% of all of video is delivered over the internet. And the rest is delivered over other broadcast mediums. So the potential of all of that broadcast to move into digital is also huge. So again, lots and lots of vectors driving that forward. Sorry about the long answer, but
as an operator, how does that strike you? That shift?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite good because I've got young children because I'm no longer, you know, the target market for a lot of the content. So yeah, we have. I checked with the guys today to go in, and we've got average of 53% of the network's video at the moment, and that spikes up to around 60% during popular events. And that might not just be sports; it could be popular SVOD, and so you know, you have to look at it. If you want to watch something and you're at the home, then it's on Wi-Fi. You know, unless you're in a coffee shop, which actually, you know, you don't see that many people in coffee shops, you know, watching their thing. So you're out and about, and that's only going to increase as a demographic changes. You know, for the sort of current generation, you know, TV isn't that big screen in the corner, and it never will be. You know, my children don't watch hardly anything. In fact, we use turning off, making them watch a telly as a punishment, because they have to just get off their things. You obviously can't entertain them yourself. Obviously, you have to do something. So yeah, we're seeing a huge shift.
Do you have a sense of how much smartphone video is being consumed over Wi-Fi at home versus on? That was no, it looks okay from here. Everything's fine.
We can't. The content providers could, because we don't have the stats of. Well, in fact, yeah. I mean, Leo's team could. So we can only see what's on the network when they're outside the home.
Got it. Rashmi, you're working with a number of clients across the value chain. How big is this video explosion? I mean, across a broader spectrum.
I think the video explosion is certainly very high and foremost in their minds. They're either working to reduce the payload on their network on a daily basis, or actually looking at how can they optimize the revenues that they bring in based on video as well. So I think it's a twofold sword that they're walking in terms of reducing costs, but also increasing what they get back for the video that's carried on their network as well. But of course, it's not all equal traffic as well. We see that there are some apps that are basically taking up almost 80% of that traffic as well. So I think we all know who the 4 or 5 apps are that take up all the traffic. So, you know, with HTTP traffic estimated to be about 79% of all mobile data traffic by 2018, it's a sizable payload that they've got to try and optimize and to cater for.
Eric, as you're looking to distribute video across across multiple platforms and indeed multiple geographies. How important is mobile in terms of your, as your products?
Well, mobile's critical. So when we look at the growth consumption in our video, frankly, it's kind of tied a little bit to time of day. So if we have a college football game on a Saturday afternoon, we're going to see very high mobile consumption. If it's an at-work audience, we're still seeing large desktop consumption. In the US market, we're seeing a tremendous amount of connected television consumption. Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV continues to grow tremendously year over year. So I think that's a pretty big growth market for us. Mobile continues to increase, though. The challenges that go with it and making sure that we don't get buffer face, as we talked about, I think is critical to this business, not just for first-party offerings and what we're doing at NBC Sports Group, but our third-party offerings with Playmaker and how we're distributing content internationally. The U.S. market and frankly every country delivers differently, and we need to investigate that and look at that and make sure that we're delivering the right content to the right territory.
Could I just quickly follow up on that, actually, because it was a good point that we were talking about. The alliance was the time of day for live sports has a massive impact. So the biggest amount of traffic we've ever had was England playing Wales in the Euros last year, and that was a 65% uplift. We did some analysis so that we can sort of see what's going to happen, and the big one was it was at midweek, it was in the afternoon. People are at work and can't offload to company Wi-Fi to watch it, so everyone was watching it on their screens. So we sort of looked and said, well, actually, that's quite interesting, because when we look forward to the World Cup in Russia, they're 4 hours ahead. All of the games, 6 o'clock and 8 p.m, will be played during everybody's working time.
So it sounds like sports is obviously a huge kind of issue to sort of plan for and to invest in. Are there other apps or genres or types of content or circumstances that are sort of driving mobile investment for mobile video, I should say?
Well, I think there's a ton. Certainly with SVOD, I think there's quite a bit, and we talked a little bit about some of the Netflix, Amazon Prime, and offload downloading to your devices. For sports specifically, it's not necessarily sports, but live event programming. So what's the programming that's still there that is appointment viewing? So if that's a Premier League game, if that's an NFL game in the United States, if that's the Olympics, it's something that you can't miss. And that's frankly, we saw this with the presidential elections that we covered, the debates as well, inauguration, red carpet shows, you'd see a similar phenomenon. So anything that's appointment-based viewing, I think, requires a different level of planning from not just ourselves, but our partners as well, all the way in the value chain.
And so I mean, can you sort of handicap those for me, like the Olympics versus the Oscars versus the presidential debates?
Sure, we don't run the Oscars, so it'll be difficult to handicap that one. But if you look at 2018, and not to be too predictive, NBC will cover the Super Bowl in the United States. We will cover the Winter Olympics 5 days later. We'll also cover World Cup Spanish language for Telemundo in the United States. So when we look at event planning and the work that we're doing with our partners at Akamai and others in the ecosystem, I think it's a tremendous amount of planning that goes into any of these events. To handicap it per se would be a little bit difficult. I think they're all going to be massive events. Specific to the World Cup example, we're 8 hours off.
Yeah.
This is an at-work audience, so where is Wi-Fi usage, where is mobile usage, frankly, where is desktop usage? You've seen stories in the past, especially of the United States back in London Olympics, where there were counties, federal counties, that were turning off access to NBCOlympics.com because they didn't want people watching the Olympics all day at work. So I guess I can, pat myself on the back for the lack of productivity, but it's ultimately a really good story, and I think it's a good problem to have.
Matt, you sort of talked a little bit about being even more specific in terms of parts of the day and potentially parts of the network that generally get more sort of clogged. Are there ways in which operators can get sort of smarter in terms of being able to identify where this is coming and predict better when it will come?
Yeah, in fact, for me and my team, one of the main things that we're going through at the moment is to get an end-to-end view of exactly what's happening. So we get analytics from lots of places. So we have partnerships with say Akamai, and we share statistics and we make sure that everything's optimal. We have the same customer. Same with YouTube and BBC. So we've got stuff we can get from the phone, we've got stuff we can get from the radio access network, the core, the content provider, the CDN, and we need to be able to get that end-to-end picture so we can tell on a cell what type of content is driving usage. And then we can start to feed that into, the outputs of that would be operational, real-time operations, capacity planning, but also we move into the predictive analytics piece. So we know from our own BT Sports, so we're part of the BT group, obviously. We can see where hotspots are during well, it's English Premier League. We just got the Premiership. So if you've got a London team that plays in, say, Manchester, because you don't get so many tickets for away fans and people don't travel, then in that borough you see a huge spike. Same as if you've got a local derby, you can see that. And when we start to map these heat maps, we can start to say, okay, well, this is a potential for new technology. In order to be able to support that, then we can start to develop new technologies such as broadcasting, but in future it may come to look at things like edge computing with NFV, being able to move content around. So yeah, it's not a one size fits all, and that's the thing. You can't just say video, we're going to look at it like this, because we're seeing, sorry, a bit long-winded, but we're now seeing the move from subscription VOD, because they're releasing each week, then that becomes a point of view. And actually, it becomes very close to live. People want to be able to watch it with their friends, Twitter, the sofa of the current generations, they say, interact and not get spoilers. So there may be something around sort of push content, carouseling, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's part of the upstream problem when you're dealing with live and this appointment viewing, whether it's SVOD and releasing. We've seen this with HBO in the past, where they're releasing at a certain time, or sports content, which is you can't pre-position any of the content. You're generating it on the fly. So I think that's the added technical complexity that we're working through.
Yeah. If I could add, there's several cases, but I think the whole concept of connected car, where you have, a lot of us have the same swim lane every day. Not everybody travels as much as a lot of people in this room probably do, and go in the same swim lane 98% of the work days. And a lot of people are on the same highway or on the same tube, same hours of the day. And it's either that car where pretty much all new cars are going to be connected by 2019. I've heard that statement by a few car manufacturers. Or even if you're in the car and using your phone, you suddenly have a huge spike in traffic where so many things have to happen. Your car may want to get its updates, which is using the network bandwidth. You may want to watching something or give it to your kids in the back seat. And apps may be updating at the same time, and all of that is happening at the same time of the day on a very narrow route. Those I think are also interesting points of congestion that we need to, as an industry, be looking at for technologies to solve. And it could end up being pre-positioning, it could end up being peer-to-peer. LTE broadcast, I think, is a very interesting technology that's definitely going to help, especially with apps or videos that have a huge audience and get updated periodically. I think we need to be hitting on all cylinders, so to speak, to really address this.
So we will get to. Sorry, did you want to add something?
No, I think we've covered a lot of those topics. Certainly, O&M, making sure that from a practice perspective, analytics, really understanding not just the broad end-to-end video analytics, but also deep analytics, deep learning, clustering types of techniques, but also predictive analytics for where your traffic will be causing you a problem, where your content types will cause you a problem, is certainly very key. But I think also the other one is being able to cater for uplink and downlink capability at the edge where it's being consumed. So edge technologies really taking, I guess, a front step in terms of really the user experience and being closer to the user, not just in terms of caching technologies, but more subscriber types of services in terms of storage, security, analytics for the subscriber, right where the consumption is being done, as well as the sort of normal processing types which we might look at in terms of encryption, DRM, closer to where it's being consumed as well. And then finally, I think one of you mentioned agility on the network. I think that will be really key in terms of the spikes. How do we absorb those spikes? Maybe a hybrid cloud model that would consume and absorb some of that capacity that's required, but also SDN, NFV types of capabilities that give you the flexibility in terms of control and scheduling of that traffic as well.
We're going to come back to quite a lot of this stuff in a second, but before we do that, we're going to try out this very nifty tool called Slido that we should be able to bring up in a second. And that essentially allows the audience to vote on a question. Anyway, let me explain how that will work while they get it up.
When you work it out.
But there you go. So the point of this is I'm going to ask. We're going to have a little bit of a chat about how important the actual quality of experience is for a mobile video service. But while we're having a bit of a chat, we'd like you guys to go ahead and vote as well. So just go to slido.com. And go ahead and vote on this. I think there was an explanatory slide. Maybe if we could go back to that just to show everybody kind of how to do it. But I think essentially, yeah, there we go. So you just go to slido.com, enter MWC 17, presumably Auditorium 4, and then that should allow you to vote. I see at least a couple of people seem to have figured it out well before this, but because we've got some votes coming in. But I'm going to essentially put that question to our panel as well. Is quality of experience important kind of across the board, or are customers willing to make some trade-offs to say, okay, this stuff is free, I don't mind a slightly lower quality, or I'm paying for this, so it should be better, or I'm getting this from my operator, it should be better. What kind of trade-offs are there? And then is there an opportunity for sort of more policy-based, more granular kind of stuff where you have sort of surge pricing essentially, or pricing for certain things based on cell congestion, things like that? Anyone have any thoughts on that?
I don't mind. Yeah.
So I certainly think there's a case for policy-based, subscriber-based consumption in terms of quality provision on the network. I do, however, also think that we like to push the boundaries on what we can see. So, for example, the downloading of, the consumption of 4K plus videos on a very tiny device, even though it may be perceptible, quality differentiation or not, is not going to stop. People want higher quality on their devices, irrespective of what they're doing. However, within that, I think there is an ability for actually providing, all the way from the distribution of content, an ability to have differentiated service of quality as well.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's not just important; it's paramount. That a user gets an optimal. Really, obviously, there are constraints. We all know that. There are areas of rural areas whilst we're making investment. There's never going to be, it's never going to be perfect. However, it needs to be as close to it as we can, and there is no compromise because we have to give our customers what they ask for. Now, we say about 4K, they pay for the data. If someone actually wants to watch 4K, then that's, it's paid for, and you put in your forecast. The only so I don't believe there's a compromise. I believe it's a technical challenge to maintain that quality as we move towards what is a finite resource. And what we can't allow, and this comes on to some of the work we're doing with 5G requirements, is it's video to just be put aside and say 5G will sort that out because there's loads of bandwidth. This doesn't work like that.
I'm going to take a bit of an agreement view and a bit of an opposite.
No, that's all right. We always do.
We always push the boundary, and we're all about delivering the best quality, and we do that in HD. We do that in 4K. We have demos of that in 8K even. I think there is a trade-off. It's a tricky question, but T-Mobile binge on plan, for an example, has shown that users are willing to trade off somewhat of quality for the unlimited.
Yes,
So
okay.
part of their quality in their eyes is unlimited is one of the factors that they call quality. And I can tell you personally, a few months ago, I was on a flight with, unfortunately, no offline content, and the screen was literally this big, 240 pixels maybe.
Yeah.
And I watched something because I was bored. It was horrible. But sort of something seems to be better than nothing, I think, in many cases. I agree with the notion we always want to be pushing and providing the best quality of experience, but I think sort of necessity will make users trade off to some degree.
And I think again, there needs to be using of the technology for those occasions where you have to have a trade-off. There's still things we can do. An adaptive bitrate has been a perfect example of that. But that's still an old technology now. It's and actually it's a very greedy technology because as soon as someone drops off the cell, they all step up. And it's not just. I think this is a very important point. It's not everybody is watching video in that cell. It's most of the traffic. Video looks after itself, as I said, latent demand, very greedy applications, but browsing doesn't. TCP applications, and you look at the impact on commerce, on e-commerce when web browsing slows down. It's actually a bigger impact to a larger amount of customers. So by solving the quality problem on video and maintaining new technologies to take that heavy lifting, if you like broadcast, then we maintain all of our customers' happiness.
And there's a just-in-time distribution capability as well. A lot of people click on videos, they watch the first few minutes, they may not watch the rest of it, so there's an ability to actually optimize a quality perception there as well.
Got it. Okay, it sounds like, Matt, certainly our audience agrees with you and with most of our panelists that QoE is extremely important. There's no compromising with video QoE. Even the folks that are the next line down, there's 63%, so a little under 2 out of 3 people involved with the poll feel that it's very important, and another just under a third sort of feel that it's still important, even if users do recognize that mobile networks are best effort. So it looks like quality ranks pretty high, or is seen as ranking high. I'm going to move on. Come back to some of the technology components, and I do want to talk a little bit about what are the solutions? How can quality be improved or maintained? How can it be measured and tracked as well? How do you kind of keep an eye on some of that stuff? And I think we have another sort of Slido poll as well on the different sort of technologies that the industry can potentially prioritize. So one of those would be video optimization, edge caching, predictive analytics potentially, storing on the terminal device, or micro caching as Leo would put it, heterogeneous networks, so HETNets, small cells, large cells, others, anything else that affects QoE, end user QoE from your point of view. So how would you prioritize these? What would you say were the top 1 or top 2 or even top 3 key kind of technologies that are really having an impact for QoE? And folks, you can go to slido.com and respond to that question as well. We'll share your
Okay, I'll give a quick answer. The way we look at it in the engineering and when you look at the techno-economics of a mobile network, anything that saves spectrum also saves backhaul and also saves core and connectivity. And that's the most expensive. You start with spectrum, then you've got backhaul, and as you move towards the internet, the economics of scaling that become cheaper. So the main technology, and I do talk about it quite a lot, the main technology to offload is live especially, but obviously we know there's other features that it can do is offloading to broadcast, because it saves spectrum and everything. So the economics work out. Once you've got, if you take the whole thing, 1.4 users per cell, it starts to pay for itself. And we've got on demand, so it's not like the old technologies where the old mobile and broadcast technologies were actually, if no one was watching it in the cell, it was spectrally inefficient because we called it broadcast to no one because no one was watching it. But now with multicast on demand, once you get the second or third, however you want to set it, it will swip automatically, and then everybody else has no impact whatsoever. So in fact, actually the graph looks better the more there are because it just stays linear.
I agree with what both of you said. You want to do it in every single layer possible. One of the areas we're very fond of is the micro caching because the device has been underutilized. So the new devices you'll see coming out this year, a typical device, if there is such a thing, will have a minimum of 64 gigs. Many people will buy new devices with 128 gigs or 256 gigs. So you've got this lots of storage. Even if you don't have storage, what does a 64 gigabyte micro SD card cost? I don't know, $5, $10? I mean, it's become, the price of a cup of coffee pretty much. So the storage in the device has become a new asset. The video compression with the new video codecs are actually staying flat versus constantly increasing, which is another good trend. And then if you have the ability to sort of time shift the utilization of the network, because this network is this asset that runs pretty much on a fixed cost model, you have a very interesting combination. And the notion here is that you take points in time, like the middle of the night is the most obvious one, or just low times. When you have traffic which is perishable traffic, if nobody used it, it went away forever, and it wouldn't have cost anything to use it. And you use those times to push on the storage on the device, which also costs you nothing, because it's just sitting there and you're not using it. And we think combining those two, along with all the other technologies, which are all critically important, like broadcast, et cetera, really create an opportunity to increase capacity, increase quality of experience, make everything really instant in a much better way. And predictive analytics is one of the key tools to power that, obviously, because you have to know how to do all that properly.
I think also in optimizing video delivery, I think it's also very key that on the distribution side, we really look at how we can use virtualization technologies to offer the agility to cater for your different transcoding, compression types of technologies, almost on the fly in an agile manner. So as the demand for different content gets even more granular and really time dependent, experience dependent, it's even more important that the flexibility in a distribution network allows you to match all permutations of your compression and transcoding capabilities to cater for different types of content, different types of devices, different types of subscriber requirements as well.
Yeah, because I mean that's an important point, I think, and because it's not just mobile. I mean, obviously this conversation is primarily focused on mobile. We're at a mobile event. The panel's about mobility, but in a lot of cases, you are seeing content providers as well as pay TV providers with multiple services trying to reach a broad spectrum of devices. So it's also managing that mix.
I think the thing that's worth noting is also device fragmentation. So we'd had this conversation for years with Android. Now we're starting to see it with connected devices as well, which is, so I'm looking at the responses from the audience. Video optimization and ultimately Edge are very important to us because supporting different transcode profiles even for Android or Roku devices can be very challenging because there's a very broad spectrum of devices that we're trying to support. So how one device is going to react versus how another, iPhone maybe got us a little bit spoiled because there's one of each model. It's very easy to program for that. tvOS similarly. But as we look towards Android, as we look towards Roku and the other emerging platforms, it's a complicated problem to solve. And good analytics into this, I think, is the critical piece to this.
And to add to that, I think the transcoding piece of that, if you, I don't think we need to think end to end, because what we don't want to go back is to the 3G world where content comes into a mobile operator and they transcode and transrate it and send it out, and that actually wasn't what the content provider wanted and wasn't what the customer asked for, and it's really expensive, and it's just it's an old technology. But transcoding and transrating in the content or the CDN, we need to have that partnership where we get what we know about the network and pass it back to the CDN, so that it can be done at source. and there's speedy coming along and there's stuff like that, but the mobile operator knows exactly what the cell conditions are. We talk about ABR, but it's still clunky. Sure. There are times when you actually could have had, because it's downloading 10-second chunks, it might have only been 1 second, it would have dropped down in rate. So I think there's a lot more that can be done there through partnerships, and again, it comes back to we've all got the same customers, so we've all got the same aim. And so, we're doing a lot of work around that.
Got it, yeah, and certainly, I mean, you all saw the audience, about 50% voted for, just under 50% voted for transcoding as the most important, with another 20% sort of going to 5G. I do want to open it up to questions from you guys. We've got a few minutes left, but I do, while people kind of get their hands up and ask a question, I think we've got somebody with a mic, so if somebody could go to that gentleman at the back. Yeah. In the meantime, can I just ask really, really quickly, we've got a tweet in there saying, 4G was supposed to solve everything. Now we're going to 5G. Why will that be different? Really quick. Or will it be different? I mean, feel free to sort of say not really.
So 5G, I guess, gives us the promise of very, very large downlink capability, gigabits a second, less than 1 millisecond per latency as well. It gives us the real promise for very many connected devices, the capability for low latency, high bandwidth video. But it also allows us to cater for some of the things that 4G wasn't able to do right at the edge where the consumption happens with the users. So I would imagine that we can actually now be able to foresee a 5G network concocted of cloudified, distributed nodes that are edges where the consumption is actually happening. That means that you've got a faster turnaround and you can actually rationalize which of your high bandwidth, low latency data needs to actually travel back through the network and which can be catered for locally where the user is actually using it.
Good. Thanks, Rashmi. So, could you ask a question? And just introduce yourself, name and organization, please.
Tim Horan with Oppenheimer. I guess, Matt, you might be best for this. I think you talked about broadcast on your network, but when you have an event where you have a few million people watching, are you talking about broadcasting over both the public internet as well as the wireless networks? And how mature is that technology now? How many different suppliers can actually do it? Is there a big difference between the suppliers?
So it's a very interesting question there, and actually it comes down to, so we have some 4G technologies, so we've got multicast, IP multicast in the fixed network, and we're driving eMBMS, which is the LTE broadcast standard for mobile, and that's some work we're doing to get handset densities. But interestingly, the 5G question, what's that going to bring? So one of the things that we're talking about in BT and socializing in the industry in general is, we have these verticals for 5G, so we've got automotive, healthcare, big, massive broadband. One of the things now is we need to move media entertainment into one of those verticals and see what requirements that has. And there I'm talking, not just distribution, contribution. So we've got all of the media, VR, AR, convergence of mobile, fixed, and in the future there may be some requirements. At some point something's got to happen with terrestrial TV. And is that something we should be looking at to see how we can pull that together? And then it starts to answer some of the fragmentation questions that you get, is to try, you really only want to make the program once, and send it out. And is there any way we can look to 5G to not solve those problems, but to at least get the requirements in and see if there's, see if we can make things better.
Sorry, it's just a really interesting question, but I think it's the first G that is really use case driven. Because now we're in an era where everybody understands that everything is connected. I mean, I remember the prediction that Ericsson made in 2010 that by 2020 there'll be 50 billion connected devices. Their CTO went up on stage at Mobile World Congress in the old FIRA. And I think most people looked at it a bit puzzled. 50 billion devices, what are you talking about? The whole world maybe had less than 1 billion devices using data. And now 50 billion seems small for 2020. I mean, it's going to be 100 or 200 or who knows the exact number. And I think going into 5G, it's very, very use case driven, and I just heard this from all my colleagues at the panel. You're really looking at it this way, and I think that's why it's a very exciting G, versus just connect everything a little faster and a little more broadly. We're actually going to design it for those specific use cases.
If we get it right, then
But
we'll be a 6.
it's still early days too. I mean, that's part of the point, which is we're still defining what that specification is ultimately going to look like. So are we solving for today, or are we solving for 2 years from now with 4K, 8K, HDR? There's a lot of use cases that still aren't on market yet that we still need to solve for and make specifications around.
Yeah, and that's where we need to make sure we've got those requirements in.
Correct.
Just like driverless cars, we talk about broadcast. So underpinning all of those verticals are multicast, unicast, and broadcast, because they all have requirements, and we don't want to just tie broadcasting or multicasting to media and entertainment, because in 5G all verticals have requirements.
Any more questions? Anyone else? Rob? I think she just coming.
Thanks, Rob Gallagher from Ovum. My question for the panel is, what are your thoughts on the potential and the impact that the Streaming Video Alliance's open caching work could have on video delivery, particularly over mobile?
Yeah, I'm quite happy to quickly. We've looked at currently at the business cases for caching video at the end and doing edge caching, and the economics don't stack up. But when we move, so we're not in the Streaming Alliance, but we do follow it as part of the work in the Mobile Video Alliance. I think my view is when we move to SDN and NFV, there won't be such a thing as edge caching or core caching. The content will be wherever it needs to be to meet those requirements of it. So automated car, yes, it will be out there in the cell to make those. But in a country like the UK, you're really limited to where you can put it to make that experience better. That's very different in Russia, for instance, because the latency is so much. But I don't see in 5G and with NFV, it will just be in the optimal place to meet the requirements of that content.
Anyone else? Okay, I mean, I think we're, if I'm not very wrong, I think we are kind of out of time. In fact, we're a few minutes over, which is the downside of having an extremely well-qualified and articulate panel. Please join me in thanking our speakers. Thanks very much for joining us here today. And thank you all. Thank you for coming today.